Welcome back, everybody. As world leaders gather for this year's United Nations General Assembly, all eyes, as usual, are on President Trump and his foreign policy and America's approach to growing instability in the Middle East. So with tensions between the United States and Iran escalating, questions loom over how the Trump administration is going to balance maximum pressure with diplomacy, because unfortunately, Iran hasn't stopped desiring to be the leader of the Middle East. And the brutal Iranian regime is facing pressure not just from President Trump, but from Iranian-Americans as well, because next week the Iranian president is expected to speak at the UN, and Iranian Americans are planning on coming out in droves to the event to protest the Iranian regime. Joining us now to talk about all of that, the deputy director of the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. He also is the author of The Iran Threat, Alireza Jafarzadeh. Alireza, my dear friend, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Always a pleasure.
Okay, give us a timeline of the protest, because I am here for it, and I want to make sure that the message of Iranian Americans and freedom-loving Iranians across the globe is heard loud and clear.
Well, you know, the first day of General Assembly is next Tuesday, September 23rd. And that's where all the world leaders will be gathering, including the United States President Trump will be speaking. And the Iranian-Americans are going to come from over 40 states to say that this is the time to hold the regime accountable for their terrorism, their development of nuclear weapons, for the killings inside Iran. This is the time to snap back all the sanctions that was in the UN Security Council resolutions, and that the real solution at the end of the day is the change by the people of Iran in order to end the rule of the clerics. Their message is that Iran is not represented by the mullahs president who comes here every year. Rather, it's represented by its own people who are very defiant against the regime. They are the real allies of the free world, and that's their message needs to be heard when all the leaders are coming right here in New York.
Yeah, Alireza, what does it look like as to the extent of what the UNGA can do? What does a maximum pressure campaign look like such that it can affect a regime change?
Well, you know, what's different this year than all the other years is that this is happening at the time that the snapback mechanism at the UN Security Council has been activated. And by the end of September, all of those sanctions that were part of the 6 UN Security Council resolutions over the past 2 decades and was put on pause in 2015 as a result of the JCPOA, all of them are going to come back unless there is a resolution to stop it. And the regime is doing everything possible to try to see how they can stop it within 2 weeks. They have very little time left. And on the other side, we're out here to say those sanctions must not, stop. They need to be imposed on the Iran regime. And they need to ramp up pressure on the regime because, regime change requires those on the ground, the forces on the ground known as the resistance units. These are the belonging to the main Iranian opposition, the Mujahideen Khalq. This is the same movement that exposed all the major nuclear sites of Iran. But Tehran had managed over the years to take away attention from the opposition and put it on the regime, or their so-called moderates within the regime that you can reach out and give them, concessions. That era must end. And I have a feeling that the outside world has now come to conclusion, hopefully, that there's no path forward with this regime. Their goal is to maintain their nuclear weapons program and continue to threaten the world. And that's where the goal of the outside world overlaps with the goal of the people of Iran, because they want to end the threat of the Iran regime, not just for the people of Iran, but for the whole region.
Yeah. All right. So if I was the Iranian regime and I wanted to stay in power, I would show up next week and I would say all the right things. I would do all the right things. I would be nice to all the right people. And I would basically do what it takes to stay in power. Is there anything that they can do at this point to gain enough support from the UN to stay in power?
Well, first of all, they have had all the time in the world in the past few years, including when the new round of talks started the past few months. They didn't comply in none of those things. They keep making promises but when it comes to delivery, they ramp up. They enrich uranium to higher levels. They increase the stockpile of weapons, but also they increase killings against their own population. Only in the past 6 days, 29 prisoners have been executed. Since Pezeshkian took office just last year, over 1,700 prisoners, including political prisoners and women, have been executed. So there's nothing that the regime can do to convince the outside world, because the time has expired on them. They have lost every opportunity. This is the time for the outside world to realize that both the people of Iran, the countries in the region, and the free world are opposed to this regime. There is an alternative led by a woman, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. A lot of the thousands of Iranian-Americans who are going to come here, they're going to support her. They're going to support her 10-point platform for the future of Iran. They're going to support her plan for the transition to a free, democratic, non-nuclear republic. Imagine, Amanda, what a world it would be if Iran has turned from the epicenter of terror and killings into the center of peace and tranquility.
Yeah, and Iran has so much to offer the world: beautiful culture, beautiful people, ideas of freedom that now are just kind of a whisper from the past. I want to ask you about President Trump and his role in all this, because the last time you and I spoke, it was after the United States struck their nuclear facilities in Iran. President Trump's role this coming week at the UN and for a time thereafter, what does President Trump need to do to send the message loud and clear that this regime has got to go?
Well, first of all, President Trump should know that as he speaks, there are thousands right outside of the UN calling for the snapback of sanctions, calling for firmness against the regime, calling for step-up pressure on the Iran regime. They're not, calling for boots on the ground or money or arms. None of that. They're saying recognize the right of the people of Iran for change. That's really all it needs to be done. President Trump and all the world leaders, they need to recognize the people of Iran as the representatives of the nation, not the mullahs. And they need to adjust their policies based on that. Don't give them money. Don't give them resources. Hold the regime accountable for what they have done in terms of terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, their missile program, and their killings inside Iran. The rest is actually the responsibility of the people of Iran and the organized resistance who have stepped up their activities, especially in the past few months. The regime has arrested so many members of the resistance units. They even executed a number of them. They are over a dozen of them who are on death row. None of those things are going to work. But the responsibility of the outside world is to recognize them, speak on their behalf, and hold the regime accountable.
Yeah. Alireza Jafarzadeh, the Deputy Director of the Washington Office for the National Council of Resistance of Iran. You guys do such great work. Alireza, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. And everybody go check out his book, The Iran Threat. And we're going to take one more break before we get to the next segment. So hang tight and we'll be back on the other side.